this is Scott with the Android Guys podcast. I am sitting here with Luke.
Hey, everybody.
Hello, Luke. How are you doing?
I'm good, man. How are you?
Well, I've been stuck playing a couple of games.
Yeah?
We do these products and app reviews podcast, and one of the things that I didn't realize was so susceptible to being sucked down the rabbit hole of some of these games. It's tough.
Yeah.
I'm not a gamer, but when you look at digital well-being, it says that I am.
Right.
I'm spending more time, I don't want to call it wasting.
No.
Enjoying my phone.
Yeah, it's entertainment.
Yeah. But at the same time, I'm also reviewing phones.
Yes.
So I'm also installing games and seeing how they perform there. And so I'm working.
Yeah.
But it's interesting.
A lot of screen time.
A lot of screen time. And if I was a parent, I would have a hard time enforcing things with a do as I say, not as I do mentality.
Sure. Well, we grew up in the 80s, so it was do as I say, and that's it.
Do as I say. Set the chicken out to thaw when you get home from school so we can have dinner when I get home. So I've really been... It's interesting how often I grab for my phone now. And I'm really trying to make sure that I don't do it in a way that I'm impeding on conversations or giving somebody the impression that I'm not having quality time with them.
Yeah. It's a hard balance, man.
Quality time is a love language for me.
Sure.
So I feel and I'm attuned to when I feel like somebody isn't enjoying their time with me. So if I look and I kind of pick up these cues and signals, that's like, oh, well, I thought we were watching this together.
Right.
Did you see that? No, I'll back it up. No, it's okay. Oh.
So you don't care.
You're not enjoying this time with me. So I want to make sure that I don't.
Sure.
You want to look up from your phone while I talk to you?
Yeah.
Just a second. I'm going to finish this level. Like, I want to make sure that I'm not that guy.
Yeah. Yep.
So.
Yep. I get that. That's been a constant struggle. I mean, ever since, our phones have been able to do so much for me. That's been my, I'm very much susceptible to the, I'm just going to look at this one thing and then I get, dragged into another notification, and before long I'm talking, while not paying attention.
And I mean, think about like some of the apps that I didn't think I would spend time in a year ago. The amount of time that I spend in Instagram,
right? Not
just looking at posts, but now it's like the reels and things,
right?
And I don't have TikTok installed on anything right now, but that's a slippery slope, man.
Yeah,
it's a real thing to get pulled down and chew up all your time.
Yeah,
and I totally get why. Digital well-being is a thing, and as a, to recognize that, it's tough.
It is.
It's really interesting because I can tell when, for instance, I'm sure you can as well when I'm on Instagram,
right? Because
you will get 4 or 5 things sent to you within a 15-minute period.
Yep, and right back to you, I'm sure.
Yeah, so I'll be sitting there and it's like. Luke reacted. I'm like, oh, get ready for my wave of things. It's like go into the app, see what everybody sent me, and then now it's my turn.
Right.
And it's just way too easy to swipe up. Next, up, next, up. And then when you start following people and wanting to see their content, it's a sickness.
It is the world we live in right now.
Yeah.
Well, so we should just talk about Android instead.
We should just do what we're here to do.
Yeah, right.
Instead of making ourselves feel bad. All right. This is the Android history, and we are looking at all of the key or major releases, or pretty much every release,
right?
Of Android since, dating back to 2007, 2008. We are now up to 2017.
Yeah.
We are on Android 8, which is Oreo.
Yes.
And this is... I realized this as I was putting the notes together. Somewhere after like 5, realized we weren't doing like 6.0, 7.0.
Right.
We just started calling it 8.
Yes.
Oreo. And there was an 8.1. There were some minor updates, but contrast that with, 8 years earlier, and it was 2.3, 3 point, so there was very particular releases. These are nice whole integers now.
Yes.
And so Android 8 Oreo was first previewed in March 2017. And this was also, I think, maybe the second year where Google gave phone makers a chance to kind of see this before,
right.
Historically, they would announce the new version of Android and put it out with their phone,
right,
or a phone, and that was the first chance to kind of see that. And then the question would immediately spring to mind is, when does my phone see it?
Right.
And well, it depends on how long the handset makers, they got to look at it, and then carriers have to spend time with it, and has to pass all these tests. Where now Google is putting it out there in developer previews. They're putting out betas over a couple of month period, and giving consumers a chance, and early adopters and developers a chance to start to create games that might leverage some of the new APIs or some of the new features. But more importantly, a chance for, same day launch of the official release for a carrier or a phone maker to say, we're good to go.
Yeah.
Look for our update, in the next week, or it'll start to roll out immediately.
Right.
So that's cool. That was a nice change. When the preview started, it was initially for the Nexus 5X, the 6P, the Pixel and the Pixel XL, a couple of other devices. But now, these previews come out, and it's usually the last couple of generations of phones have a chance to, like you're doing with 12,
right,
prior to the official release.
Right.
This was codenamed internally as Oatmeal Cookie.
Yeah.
Android 8, which is O. And if you kind of follow the names, the convention of it would have been more sweets and, dessert kind of candy things. So this follows nougat.
Yes.
But the official release didn't come out until August 21st, 2017.
Yeah.
Luke, what was the world like at that time?
August 21st, 2017. So if we go into the not so way back machine, but way enough back, if you were listening to music at the time, you would have heard one of these 3 songs on the radio. You would have heard Unforgettable, French Montana, featuring Sway Lee. You would have heard Wild Thoughts, DJ Khaled. That's Rihanna and Byron Tiller. Or you would have heard Despacito.
Oh.
Yeah.
4 years.
4 years ago. Those were the top 3.
See, it feels like 2 because you start subtracting COVID time.
Sure, right.
That you just have to immediately subtract a year for that.
Yeah.
Maybe almost 2 now.
Yeah.
So it does feel like, man, we were just watching all of these videos on Instagram.
Right. Of
people singing that and using it, and
yes.
Alexa play.
Right.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Okay, so 4 years ago.
4 years ago, in the movie theater or on streaming service of choice, because now we saw this with our last history episode. We're seeing more direct streaming releases.
Yes.
So when we talk about movies now and putting us in the head frame of that time, some of these releases are just streaming releases. So that one of them being What Happened to Monday. Do you remember that movie?
I don't know that I do.
Nomi Rapace.
Oh, wait, yes.
Willem Dafoe.
Oh, yes.
It's a great movie. It's on Netflix.
I never did see that. Okay.
It's a good one. It's a very interesting. The idea is dystopian. You're only allowed to have one child.
Mm-hmm.
And
I remember now.
There's some... Naomi plays her and all of her sisters. Okay. And how they were all raised as a different day of the week.
Yep.
And they're able to live this life and share this life but obviously something happens. So
that was 4 years already.
That was 4 years ago. Hitman's Bodyguard with Ryan Reynolds.
Okay.
And then also Logan Lucky.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Remember that movie with Channing Tatum?
Yep.
And Adam Driver?
Adam Driver.
Yeah.
That was a funny movie.
It's a great movie.
Daniel Craig too, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Hilarious. So those are the movies. And then TV, we'll go back to Netflix. Atypical premiered.
Okay. I've got a buddy who that's one of his favorite shows.
It's a great show. I really like that show. DuckTales was rebooted on Disney XD.
Shut up.
Yeah.
I feel like they just rebooted that a half hour ago.
Yep, 4 years ago.
Okay.
And then on USA was the debut of the first season of The Sinner.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a great series.
I never did jump into that one.
Really? Oh, you got some homework, it sounds like.
Well, I've got games to play, and
well, you can watch. You can put
I can
The
do
Sinner
both.
on. Yeah,
I can do
and
both.
play your game. So yeah, that's the time we are in the release of Android 8 Oreo.
BC, before COVID.
BC.
We're still.
Yeah. This was in, we were in the times of COVID, like 8 or 10 probably, not 19. Anyway, so yeah, Android 8 Oreo, we usually start up and talk about just the key features. We don't hit all the features of the release, but kind of the ones that were like maybe the most quality of life improving or notable things that maybe new features that have been built on since that we all know. So
this was an interesting one for me, kind of like Nougat, where I don't remember there being a ton.
Sure.
But as I look back
through the list,
through the list with hindsight, it's kind of, oh, yep, that's where this started.
Yeah.
And these were some helpful ones that I, take for granted. I think some people may not realize, this feature's been around for 4 years now, or has only been around for 4 years.
Right.
Whereas Android's been around, coming up on 14.
Right.
So it wasn't until this point that you were able to do some of the things that you can with your phone today. One of the first things that we'll get out of the way is basically it was designed to boot up faster, run smoother, be more efficient with your battery. But that's all versions of Android.
Yeah.
This one becomes a little bit more, hey, it's easier to use the phone and the small things that you're doing, such as automatically filling in your logins for apps.
That's like, you don't think, that's one of those things for me that I go, oh, that was only 4 years ago? Feels like I've been able to do that forever.
Yeah. Well, there are some like Chrome saving passwords.
Sure.
But when you log into, say, Twitter,
right,
to actually be able to store your app logins, that was a big step.
It's huge, especially for people like us who change phones pretty often.
Yeah, yeah. And it's one thing to kind of pick up a review unit and just kind of install a little bit here, maybe one Google account, but to like really make your phone you again, you're probably logging into multiple accounts and installing all kinds of apps and services, and you're like, oh, I don't remember my password to that, or I forgot that I forgot what it was because I put it behind my fingerprint.
Right.
So I have to actually look that up.
Because now I don't have a fingerprint on this phone.
Right. So I'm using a face unlock or something. So, yeah, that's a really helpful thing to just automatically say, oh, you're logging into this social network app. Well, you're not in the browser, but we know your password.
Right.
You let us back it up for you.
Right.
And all this stuff is like opt-in, secure.
Yeah.
This isn't like we know more about you than you think.
No.
These are things that, if you don't feel comfortable with it, you can get out of these things.
Yeah, because you can, revoke those permissions at any time. Picture-in-picture.
Yeah, that's one that I don't realize how often I use.
Right.
Google Maps is a big one.
Maps is big, and YouTube for me.
Yep.
So it's kind of cool if I'm watching a YouTube video and a text pops up, I can click it and then I'll just minimize my YouTube into a little corner. I don't have to, sometimes it would just keep playing, but you would have no video.
Yeah, so just the audio in the background.
Oh no, I gotta pause this before I can get back to it. But
YouTube TV as well is one that I use a lot,
especially right now, football season.
Yep, exactly. So I'll have that and just kind of drop it down in the corner and be able to clean up email, reply to messages, browse Instagram endlessly. Play my games.
Play puzzle. Tales.
Do all the
Let's see what else we have here. Tap notification dots.
Yes.
To see what's new or to swipe them away.
That's not one that I use too often.
No.
And it's one of those I kind of come back to and go, oh yeah, I can do that from here.
Yeah, it's like creating the memory for me that I can do it, because I find myself the same thing going, oh yeah. Why don't I do this more?
Yeah, why do I live strictly in the drop-down notifications? Why do I, have it do that? Where if you really want to tailor your experience, you can say, don't show me notification, but, the little
bar.
Yep.
Yeah.
Or show it in the, the above the icon. But if you get a new email, you tap that in the corner of your icon, you can see who it's from. Or if you have text messages, they're more than just shortcuts to apps now.
Yes.
They're smarter so that you can take action. If you long press on an icon, somewhere along the line, long pressing on an icon for certain apps gave you the ability to say, oh, my camera, if I hold down on the icon, it'll give me launch a selfie, record a video instead of just opening the app.
Right.
So they became smarter icons. And those notification dots were one of those things where actually we can tell you have an update, and this is specifically what that update is without having to open that app altogether.
Right in line with that was the ability to snooze notifications. That's
another one of those things where I haven't forced myself to do that too often.
Yeah.
I rarely do it with email, but I feel like, I don't know if that's a slippery slope thing for me that I'm afraid of, like just constantly kicking that can down the road.
Yeah.
But yeah, if I'm in the middle of something and I just say, not now, remind me, a perfect example would be if, I'd say, hey, remind me later today to take out the trash.
Right.
Well, you're just going to text me right away, take out the trash, and then it'll be in my unread.
Right.
Where I could actually just say, you know what? No, I'm going to snooze that for 2 hours.
Right.
So I can take these notifications and start to actually use them in a purposeful way.
Sure.
Speaking of notifications, now applications or games have what are called channels. Android 8 gives these gives developers a much tighter control over what kind of notifications. Up until now, it's usually a case of all or nothing.
Right.
At one point, Gmail was you just either received notifications for emails or not.
Right.
And then you could go in and say, well, I don't want this account to send me a notification, or I want this account to have this sound.
Right.
So I know that that's a work email.
Right.
And that's a, personal.
Right.
Where notification channels can really dial in. For instance, Twitter, we looked at, gives you the ability to say, I don't need to be notified of everything.
Right.
And Twitter can be pretty lousy about this.
Yeah.
People you follow, just randomly deciding, here's a tweet from somebody you follow. Well, thanks. How did you decide to serve this one up to me?
Right.
Was it some algorithm that you guys think this is, hot topic or something? Or spaces or topics. Like I don't need to be reminded that I can follow topics or that people are generally discussing something right now.
Right.
So these channels give you the ability to say, you know what, the only thing I'm concerned with is I want a direct message notification and maybe emergency alerts.
Right.
All that other junk, I don't want it.
Right.
And if you go into your app settings today, check a lot of your apps because it's not an all or nothing thing. Right. And when we start to set up our phones, sometimes what we do is we just turn off notifications.
Right.
Where if you spend a moment looking at that app in the settings, you might find that you can actually control that in a way that still gives you what you want.
Right.
Without all the other junk.
Yeah.
So, Instagram, you don't have to have every time somebody likes something or reacts if you want to change that. So, and those are called notification channels, and that came about with Android 8.
Another thing is there's a couple emojis that were rescinded. So the blob.
Yeah, they got rid of...
I totally forgot about that.
Remember the blob? I mean, you can still find them in like those sticker kind of things, but that was their version of emoji.
Yep.
They completely overhauled it to kind of fall in line with smiley faces that everybody uses.
Right.
With a little bit of Google...
Sure.
Flair or character to the guys.
Right. And then one that I use, I think, constantly now, and it's very nice. Another feature in Oreo was smart text selection. Mm-hmm. So if you had a phone number or an address or a PIN number or something like that came through on a notifications, you could click that, and it would then, if it was an address, it would just pull up maps.
Yep.
And you could see reviews. It would pull up the Google search for that, and you could see reviews of that place or their phone number, their hours, and where you could even just go in and get directions.
Mm-hmm. And phone numbers is a big thing.
Huge.
If you're texting somebody a phone number, there's only so many... A 3-digit number that's in parentheses followed by a 3-digit, a dash, and a 4-digit.
Right.
It's got to be a phone number.
Right.
Or 90-some% certainty that is a phone number. So why not open up the dialer?
Right.
So that's an interesting one to me that seems like, oh, yeah, this is great. Why didn't you have it before?
Right. Well, and you didn't have to, if it wasn't, because a lot of times that people would be like, well, you just, select and copy and then just paste it. But if somebody says, oh, here's the number, blah, 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 let me know if you need anything else.
Yep.
You can't, it puts that whole thing, if you copy that whole message, or it just, the ability to just show up and say, oh, it's saying, okay, based on what's in this, these 9 numbers or 10 numbers we're guessing is a phone number. Mm-hmm. So click on it and we'll pull up the dialer.
Yep.
You don't have to go back and forth between your dialer and your messages to try and remember the phone number, all kinds of stuff.
Or remember this number for me.
Right.
Then, okay, what was it I told you?
Yeah.
Like, dude, I wasn't listening.
Type this into your phone and then read it back to me when I'm ready.
Like, no.
Yeah.
Yeah, this changed all that.
Mm-hmm. And then the last one we have down here, auto enable Wi-Fi.
Yeah, man, that's one. Like, if you're out at a place or maybe in a city that has like public Wi-Fi, or you're connecting to it, and maybe it's junk, and you're just having trouble with it, and you're like, you know what? I'd rather not even bother with your Wi-Fi because I'm bouncing to and from cellular. I'm just going to turn my Wi-Fi off.
Yeah.
Well, Android 8 now makes it possible so that you can, when you're home,
it'll turn back
on and say, hey, we know this network. Yep. We trust this network, and this is secure, and we think you're probably going to want to connect to it.
Yeah, we know you had your Wi-Fi off, and we know you want to be on it here because you'll save your data because you're going to be here for a while. And because that was what used to happen, right? Those situations you're talking about, you turn your Wi-Fi off, and then the next day you're like, oh yeah, my Wi-Fi's off from yesterday. I forgot. Mm-hmm. And the whole night you'd been at home just using your data.
Yep.
And this, 2017, this is still the time when not everybody had unlimited data still.
Yeah. And Wi-Fi, was just the way people want to, they want to stay connected if possible.
Yeah.
And if you're having a less than stellar experience with it, to me, no Wi-Fi at a hotel is better than crap Wi-Fi.
Absolutely.
I'd rather just know
Yep.
and just hotspot off my phone.
Yep.
Than to deal with something that's slow and buggy and troublesome.
Or you have to relog in every hour or two.
Yeah. So for me, if I'm turning that off, I would not remember to turn it back on. And I've done that where I'll be hours at home and I'm like, oh my gosh, all these YouTube videos and all these things,
Right.
browsing Reddit and every video I'm watching, every GIF and image and crap, it's all on my data,
Yeah.
But that's not such a bad thing today because we have, much better data plans. But, so that was something that I think is, take a look at your phone. It may not be on by default. Mm-hmm. If that's something that you're thinking, that sounds pretty cool. I didn't realize my phone did that. You may want to check. Yeah. Because it may do it, but you may not have it enabled. Right. So that's a good feature to have. That's really the main outline that I can see for Android 8.
There was one more thing. There was Go Edition.
Yes.
So this is the first we saw of Go.
Yeah, this was a completely different approach. Up until this, it was, here's Android. Here's the latest version of Android. And at one point, we discussed a few episodes back where they took Android and said, we're going to streamline it, we're going to optimize it to run on lower memory requirements, processor.
Because we were dealing, if we remember back then, with a lot of what we were calling fragmentation in the market. Yeah. Where new phones were coming out that ran better, newer versions of Android, and the older phones couldn't keep up. They couldn't run it.
Yeah. So Android Go Edition is optimized for a completely different reason. It would be for people who might live in a part of the world where their first taste of internet comes from a phone. Right. Where their first, touch of connectivity is a smartphone. Mm-hmm. And those are not going to be your $800,000 flagship phones. These are going to be people who, this is a $90 phone, $120 at best type of thing. So with that, you're going to end up with what we would view as yesterday's hardware. Yes. Last week's really. Right. So Android Go Edition is designed initially for phones that only had 1 gigabyte of RAM. And we're talking about phones now that are 3, 4 routinely. And we'll talk more about the hardware after the break. But at this point, a phone with 1 gigabyte of RAM is something that would have come from 2013. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's, for all intents and purposes, in 2017, it's a dinosaur.
Yeah. And it, you could still be holding onto a phone, and use it at that point. Be one of those. Well, this is all I really need. Right. I bought this thing when it was $500, and it's done me well. But then this is really for the segment of people saying, "I need to get online. I need to be able to do some of these things from a phone." Right. But I've got a really limited budget. Right. So one of the things with the Go Edition is it was a much leaner version of not just Android, but the apps that were designed for it. Same thing is everything was designed to use less data. Yep. Didn't have as many animations and graphics. Were much easier on battery. Yep. And things that just didn't take up very much storage. Right. This is a really lean kind of like...
It's still designed to give you the same Android experience that was the current experience as much as possible.
Right. But in a way that it's like, obviously this person isn't playing games. This is a person who needs to communicate. Wants to be able to call family or
and get
conduct
email.
Business. Yeah, to be able to do these things. One of the things was like the notifications, the quick settings that we kind of take for granted today. A couple of those they gave easier access to things like view the battery, the data, and the storage, so that you can kind of really, you might have a very limited data plan that you're working with, so you want to be really mindful of that. And then like recent apps, for us, our phones they have enough memory that we can have multiple games and apps open and kind of go between them. Here, it kind of limited in that to 4.
Right.
So this is going to be okay. If we allowed it to 5, 6, or more, then you're going to have a less than ideal experience. So their way around that was, let's just make it so that it only shows the 4 most recent apps to preserve the memory. So that was Android 8 Oreo Go Edition, and they still do support Go Edition, are still working on that. That has changed a little bit now. They're up to, I think, 2 gigs of RAM or less. But still, there are phones that people are getting now that are 3, 4, 6. But on the high end, 8, 12 gigabytes. So it's a different part of the world that we may not think about. But Google and the Android team was thinking about, how do we
get this to everybody?
Yeah. And obviously it's, one hand is self-serving. How do we hook people on Google services?
Exactly.
But on the other hand is, how do we enable and empower people who may have these tremendous ideas and these abilities that if we don't do it, it's incumbent on us to we can help them.
Right.
Nobody else is doing that. So.
Right.
Yep. So you want to take a quick break and then we'll talk about some hardware?
Sounds good.
All right. We'll be right back. We are back.
Hey.
Did you miss me, Luke?
Yeah.
I missed you.
Aw.
Even though technically we sat here at the table together and looked at our phones and talked and giggled and
completely different personalities when the record button is hit.
Yeah. So, I'm ready to get back into it.
Yeah.
For the second half here, where we talk about hardware.
Yeah.
And what we typically do is discuss a phone or two that was released at the time of that version of Android.
Right.
Or may have been a key phone of the day.
Right.
That era. So for this one, we will talk about the Pixel 2 and its sibling, the 2 XL.
Yeah.
And then we'll skip ahead a few months and talk about a Samsung phone. One of their flagship devices, the Galaxy S9.
Yeah.
So, Pixel 2 looked a lot like Pixel 1.
Sure did.
And I don't know if I hated that or loved that.
Yeah. So, I remember the Pixel 2 XL is the one I had. I loved that phone.
And what color did you have?
I had the white version. Yeah.
With the black?
Yeah.
The piano?
Yeah. The Panda, I think, is what it was at the time.
But it looked like a piano key color. Yeah. I always wanted that one.
It was a great phone.
I always ended up with reviewing. They would
just black.
It's just black.
Yeah. But yeah, it was man, such a cool phone. I remember we talked about episode or two ago. We talked about the fingerprint and how you could swipe down with it. And I remember that this was the one that was at the time I was showing. This was, I don't know what it was. A lot of people in my world were iPhone users, and I was showing no man, if you have this fingerprint, you can just swipe down. It's right here, and the phone was nice. I mean, it was a good size. The 2XL was a 6-inch screen,
which felt really big,
huge.
But when you contrast that with today's phones, it's on the smaller side already,
right?
Or now,
right?
But that because of where the front-facing camera is, where the Navigation, we were still using like soft keys for back, home, and multitasking. When you were showing the phone off, was it because you felt like this is an awesome phone or this is an awesome Android experience? Both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It had everything to me that I had wanted in a phone. It felt like this is the fully rounded experience now.
Yeah. The word I use all the time is intentional and cohesive.
Yes.
It just feels like they didn't sub out this for, hardware from somebody else and then put the software. This is all, now I get what all the iPhone people have been saying all these years where, it's all under one roof and I'm the same way.
So just specs on the Pixel line. We can get right into that. It had a Qualcomm SD
Snapdragon 835. And that's, we're not that far now. We're a couple of years later, 4 years, and really only about that many generation of 800 series processors.
Right.
We move into the 850s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, but that's a screaming processor.
Yeah.
That was the 835 was a popular one at the time. It was just about every phone that was announced that we covered in that space or that time was 835.
Right. You pair that with 4 gigs of RAM, and then it had 64 gigs or 128 gigs of storage. So no more 32 gigs. It was just bumped right up. The Pixel 2, the normal size, quote unquote, was a 5-inch 1080 screen, and the XL was, like I said, the 6-inch, but that was a 1440 screen.
Yeah, so it had what they call a PPI or per pixel, pixels per inch count. So that was again something that we don't have really written down here, but this was the era of AR.
Yes.
And Daydream and being able to, put your phone in there and watch a movie, experience a trip to a virtual museum, so pixels, if that's a thing you're doing, you get an extra inch, but you're getting more pixels squeezed in there too, in that inch. Not to derail it, the conversation, but I'm going to derail it.
Do it.
Did you spend much time with any type of like Daydream or VR goggles or any type of
I spent time. It's funny that you said
cardboard.
There was a ViewMaster that came out at that time.
Yes.
So I actually spent time with that because they had some really cool going to see like Mayan ruins and there was like a space one, and I remember that it was doing that with my boys and showing them that they could look around in VR at different things and say, they could interact with these different signs in the app and see, oh, this is what this ruin was, or this is what this building, or this is what this galaxy is.
Yeah, I did it mostly as like proof of concept to show people what Google was all around and about at the time. I remember with the first Pixel getting, kind of like specific things as part of like the reviewer's guide of like, here are some videos to check out and some things to do. There was a moment where I was, checking out like even Google Movies.
Yeah.
Where it looked like you were sitting on a hill outside under a tree and it was being like projected on a screen.
Yeah.
And it felt like, you had that distance. It didn't feel like you just had to stare at the movie. You could kind of like
see a little bit of around you.
Yeah, you didn't feel like your eyes were forced onto it. But I do remember that like things just, the battery went quickly.
Yes.
And phones got really warm.
Yes.
I remember the first Pixel almost to the point of like overheating. It was just like man, I really like this, but it's not ready.
Yeah, not quite there.
Not quite what. But so that was, with the resolution became super important. You know, we've had discussions of, can the average person look at a screen and tell the difference?
Right.
More importantly, does the average person care?
Right.
If I show my dad a phone at, 720p and one at 1440, as long as he can read the text, he doesn't know or care.
Right.
But for fans and enthusiasts and gamers and, early adopters, bullet points and specs matter.
Right. Keep going down the line. This had a 12 megapixel camera with 4K video, which was a huge thing for it then.
Yeah. The visual core was a big thing because it was I think it was essentially the same camera from the original Pixel.
Yes.
That it was just it isn't broken.
No.
And we were number 1 best camera on phone ever last year.
Right.
Why bother replacing it?
Right. We just had 4K video.
Yeah. And I don't even remember for sure. Maybe the first one had it. I didn't write it down. But either way, at this point, we had talked a previous episode about, needing that storage.
Right.
So if you're considering recording video, 32 gigs of storage is, you don't want to even think about that.
Right.
Or you need expandable storage. So 64 and 128 makes a lot of sense. So the camera experience, again, for a couple of years, I kept the Pixel 2 in the office as the phone that I would just kind of keep powered up. But I didn't use it to check email, do any gaming, anything. I just grabbed it for taking photos of things. It was just, you having a product to review or something, I would just grab that, snap some photos that way. Or if I need to leave to take some pictures, family, friends, birthday party, Pixels, man, just switch to that portrait mode, and it's all that magic is
easy button
done for you, man.
Yeah.
People think you're the great photographer.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah.
They also had IP67.
That's nice.
Yes.
There was a point where that was only relegated to a select few phone makers and phone line. It's now one of those things where if it's not present, it's missing.
Sure.
Here it was nice that it was kind of yep, it's also this.
Right.
So, it's not just splashes, but it's, this, it'll handle water okay.
Right. USB-C power delivery.
Yes. That is also one of those things where, we went from micro USB to USB-C, and that had started to become, this is what you get in a flagship.
Right.
But now power delivery is hey, this is also a much more efficient way of charging this.
Yes.
Because if you read about it today, USB-C can be kind of a muddy, ugly thing with some confusion. But, if you have something that has power delivery, if you have the option for it, get it.
Yep.
That makes a difference.
With that, the USB-C, if we're still just talking about that, there was also no headphone jack.
Yeah, where a year earlier they stood on stage and laughed about, yes, it's still included, and Apple took it out, 1 year removed, gone.
Yep.
And I've struggled with that since then.
Yeah.
Because I want to go with the Pixel phone, and I love the Pixel experience, the Android, all the hardware, the software. But I think that is one of those things for me is why I love the Pixel A series is because it's present in there. And I know that headphone jacks are dying and going away.
Sure.
But I have a used truck that I'm going to drive till the wheels fall off.
Yep.
Does not have Bluetooth in the stereo, and I will plug in to listen to an audiobook or podcast, and that removal of the headphone jack, I did not like being forced.
Yeah.
Are you a Bluetooth only kind of headphone guy, or do you have wired headphones?
I do have wired headphones, and at this time, I was still doing a lot of audio editing and stuff like that, and so I had a nice pair of like stereo headphones, and not being able to plug them in to listen to music because I would just use those because I would just be plugged in my computer using those to edit. And then I could just switch over and listen to something on my phone if I wanted. And not having that headphone jack was annoying because I had to I either couldn't charge because I had to plug in my adapter to be able to listen to my headphones, or I had to find another, a wireless headset.
Yeah. Well, and then if you're messing with audio and video production, then you got to worry about latency.
Yes.
For Bluetooth.
Yes.
And that was, it's still not perfect.
No, there's still issues depending on what, even down to what is encoded and how it's encoded to be able to be played back on Bluetooth seamlessly.
Yep.
But yeah, it's not as much of an issue for me anymore. I was the one that adopted myself and just said, okay, I see the writing on the wall. I'm gonna make it so it's a little easier for me. But
yeah. I think for me I'm really okay with the earphone and earbud kind of thing.
Yeah.
I do, I don't mind being transitioned that way.
Sure.
But at the same time, when this was going on, wireless, we weren't quite at the AirPod stage where everything was two little individual earbuds that you could put in one or both. That you still had these things that were like sport bands that were drape around your neck or, that were connected to each other.
Yeah.
And so at that point I was like, if I still have this wire in the back of my neck,
what's the point? Why can't I just plug in and then I don't have to worry about making sure a connection or another device needs charged?
Yep. So I've taken to really appreciate a couple of audio manufacturers.
Yes.
And really like some of the products, and they're just become my those are my everyday headphones, earbuds. These are the nice ones you can see over my shoulder that I keep in a box those are Dad's.
Right.
You're going to get those out. You're going to put them back in the case, when you're done with them.
Or better yet, you're just not going to get them out.
Yeah, you're not allowed to touch.
Yeah. These are mine.
Yeah. I wish you would stop looking at that box, Luke.
Yeah. That's a nice looking box. And then this had a 8 megapixel front camera.
Yep.
And Gorilla Glass 5 for the glass.
Yep. So pretty strong. And the thing with Gorilla Glass is it's not just getting stronger, but it gets thinner.
Yes.
And more responsive.
Yes.
And harder to shatter.
And scratch.
And
then last thing for these devices, there's two more things. There is the battery. There's a 2700 milliamp battery on the regular Pixel 2, and the XL had a 3520 milliamp battery.
Bigger form, allows for a longer battery.
And then the price point. So the Pixel 2 was $650 for the 64 or $750 for the 128, and the XL was $850 or $950 respectively.
Yep. So you were paying $200 difference to get the bigger, higher pixel screen and battery.
Do you think it was worth it?
From a 5-inch to a 6-inch, that felt very different.
It felt like a noticeable difference.
Yeah. That was, for me, I have smaller hands, so I tend to be okay with the smaller. But there's always something about grabbing something that just is a big screen of the moment.
Yes.
And I don't know if that would be an 8-inch phone today to say this is a big screen, but 6 inches in 2017, with the bezel, with the camera and all that, it felt like a really big phone.
Right.
And when you open up a game, or if you open up email and you look how many more lines of this message I can read without having to scroll.
Yep.
That, felt like, yeah, you know what? It's definitely worth it.
Yeah. And then the other device we have is the Samsung Galaxy S9.
Yeah, so we've talked a couple times about Samsung, kind of where they are. Galaxy S series has been around for a long time now and is usually the benchmark kind of pace setter for the year.
Yes.
Their S phone would come out in the spring, and then later in the fall would be their Note series.
Yes.
So the Galaxy S9 would come out the following spring. So it would run Android 8 with Samsung's One UI, its version of the skin or user experience interface. Some of the specifications for this, it's similar. But it is a little beefier in a couple spots, and it also gives you this like, well, of course I want that phone.
Yeah,
it's Samsung, and I can find it at any carrier. Where the Pixel is, that particular model was available through Verizon and unlocked, and then through Google Fi. But you couldn't go to AT&T and say I want the Pixel 2,
right?
Or T-Mobile or Sprint at the time. Where a Galaxy S9, it's ubiquitous. Yes. I mean, prepaid carriers, MVNOs, unlocked. I mean, you can find them at like Sam's Club,
right?
And pick your carrier.
And I think that's why the popularity of the S series has stayed as long, is because anybody could get it.
Yeah, and it kind of picked up the mantle and just kind of ran with it. And they didn't do a whole lot to make that a problem.
Right.
They didn't have too many missteps. I mean, the biggest misstep might have been like the Note 7 that had the exploding fire kind of stuff.
Yeah, you can't take it on a plane or whatever.
But other than that, the Galaxy S, it was just kind of like, well, there's the iPhone and then there's the Galaxy S.
Right.
And then everything else is fit in along the way.
Right.
So at the time, this particular model was a 5.8-inch screen, so close to the Pixel 2 XL.
Yep.
But this is another 2960 by 1440.
Yeah.
Very high resolution.
Yeah.
Very high pixel per inch count.
Yep.
In fact, it's higher because it's a smaller screen.
Right.
Giving you more pixels.
Right.
Protected by Gorilla Glass 5.
Yep.
But under the hood, what did we have?
That was a Qualcomm Snapdragon 845, not the 835, an 845.
Yep, because
slightly better.
We passed through January, CES, and the new kind of like new generation of processors.
Yep.
So this is one of the first to kind of grab that and say, hey, here's the new benchmark.
And then also had a 4 gigs of RAM. This one, it had 64, 128, or 256 storage.
Expandable.
Yeah.
Another distinction. A lot of people have or had micro SD cards, where they had their music installed, or games, or pictures, or videos, or want to record high resolution stuff. This gives you the ability to kind of have that expandability.
Yep.
Google, for its part, was keeping its photos and everything in the cloud, doing that for you.
Yep.
But if you're moving from one generation to the next, and you've kind of stepped into Samsung's sandbox, you're probably not going to get out of it.
Right.
They've probably got you, maybe not every year, but every couple of years, you're like, okay, what's the new version of what I've got?
Right.
Headphone jack.
Yes, it did.
Where the Pixel 2 XL and the Pixel 2 did not.
Yep.
Still make the argument of I may not use it, but put it in there.
Yeah. Let me decide.
Yeah. Give me the hardware, the feature. Bigger battery.
Yeah.
3,000 milliamp. And this had wireless charging.
Yes.
And quick charging 2.0.
Yes.
Over USB-C. So a really well-rounded device.
Yeah.
At this stage, I knew a few people who had the phone, and I still know one or two people that do today. But we're getting into that era of putting your phone on your phone bill and splitting it up.
Yes.
So we can do that feature creep. We can also increase the price.
Yep.
This one started at like $720, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And then went up.
Yeah.
that was, you know, right around the time when we started to see a lot of like trade-in values for phones.
Yeah.
That started to really take off. And this phone is only $14 a month if you get it with this plan. And,
right.
you know, you trade in and you bring your number to us and do all these kind of like jump through a few hoops, but you're spreading the cost of your phone out over, 2 years instead of paying for it outright. So let me do the math on this real quick. So if we're doing a base price of $720 and we're just splitting that out over 24 months, that's $30 for your phone. That's, to me, is that vicious cycle of once you're on that, it's hard to get out of that because, I'll just take the new phone.
Yeah.
You'll take my old one. It's still in good condition.
Right.
And you're just constantly like leasing a car.
Basically.
So that's the one thing for me is when I try to convince people of getting a Pixel phone is, you probably got to pay for it all up front or, if you split up your payments through the Google store. But once you break yourself of that kind of like carrier, going through your carrier for your phone, you'll be so much better for it.
Right.
And there's something about stock Android and immediate updates and just clean version of Android, as opposed to, not to say that Samsung's doing anything wrong, but it's a different world.
Right. It is.
I don't have anything else hardware-wise here.
Me either.
All right. So this was the Android 8 Oreo retrospective. If you get a chance to listen to any of our previous episodes, we've done quite a few.
Yes.
And we've only got a few left now. We've
That's
got
right.
9, 10, and 11.
Yep.
And then quite literally right now, 12 is available.
Yes.
Device-wise, different story.
Yeah.
But it's fully baked, ready to come out of the oven. So next week we will do Android 9. And we stop talking about foods and desserts. Yeah. And we go to pee. So that's going to do it for me. I'm Scott, and this is
Luke.
Thanks for listening.
See ya.